Good morning. I'm Dr. Sandra Hernández, and I'm your moderator today. I'm very pleased to be with you. I want to also thank Tara Tays for sponsorship of this conversation this morning. We're going to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, which is Latinos in the boardroom and Latino governance in particular. I'm currently the president and CEO of the California Healthcare Foundation. And prior to that, I was the CEO at the San Francisco Foundation, where I had an opportunity to work with many extraordinary board members and leaders. And really, over the course of the last 30 years, I've had the opportunity to serve with extraordinary board leaders and chairs and committee chairs, as well as to try to recruit people to board positions. So this morning, we're going to have an exciting conversation with two really extraordinary guests, Mr. Julián Castro and Noramay Cadena. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a moment, but first let me just say that the goal of today's conversation is really to talk about the opportunities for growing the Latino representation on boards, corporate boards, as well as public serving boards, and also for nonprofits as well. The entire ecology of Latino representation, I think, is part of the conversation that we're trying to have today. And our goal is to hear from Julián and Noramay, but really also to engage all of you in this conversation. So let me start with a very brief introduction. Julián probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but Julián is, over the last 6 months, joined as the CEO of the Latino Community Foundation. And of course, you know, prior to that, he was Secretary for HUD under President Obama and was the mayor at the age of 26, correct me if I'm wrong, Julián, of San Antonio, Texas. And Noramay is a managing partner at Supply Chain Capital, an early stage venture capital firm focused on food tech. Noramay is also a member of the Latino Corporate Directors Association, and we're going to explore their goals and their work in a moment as well. And she's a board member of the Latino Community Foundation. So with that, what I'd like to do is ask both of you, maybe start with you, Julián, just a little bit about your life journey to public service. You have been an extraordinary public servant to date, continue to represent and engage other folks to do so. But I think it'd be helpful for our guests this morning to hear a little bit about your path to that. And then Noramay, I want to ask you to do the same. So with that, Julián, let me welcome you to the program. Thank you for joining us and look forward to hearing a little bit about your background.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. Sandra, thank you so much for moderating today, for hosting us. I feel like this is a mini reunion of the Latino Community Foundation, because at one time you headed up the Latino Community Foundation and were so important to its growth and success. And Noramay today, as you mentioned, is on the board of the Latino Community Foundation. I'm Julián Castro. I often feel like I need a name tag because some of y'all may know that I have a twin brother, Joaquin. And Joaquin and I grew up on the west side of San Antonio, Texas, with my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother had come to the United States in 1922 as a 6 or 7-year-old orphan because her parents had passed away in northern Mexico, and her nearest relatives lived in San Antonio. She grew up there, got taken out of school in the 3rd grade, so never got a formal education, and ended up working as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter, and raising my mom, who was her only child, as a single parent. And my mom raised my brother and me, mostly as a single parent. My grandmother was very traditional. She would go Catholic, would go into church and wear a veil. Folks that remember, wearing a veil in church, a black veil. My mom was a hellraiser. She was a Chicana activist in the 70s and trying to push the boundaries of representation and improve the conditions of the mostly Mexican-American community there in San Antonio. And so Joaquin and I grew up with this sense of that you should do something not only to better yourself, but try and better the condition of others as well. I grew up in the public schools of San Antonio and ended up going to Stanford. and graduating in 96 and then going on to law school. And both of us together, I can't get rid of my brother. He's a minute younger than I am. And we went together to college and law school. And then both of us went into the practice of law. Both of us went into public service. Me at the city, eventually becoming mayor. I became mayor at 34. You gave me a few years.
Okay.
Not quite that young. And Joaquin eventually, he's still in Congress, and then served in President Obama's cabinet as a Secretary of Housing. I feel tremendously blessed in my life with the opportunity that I've had. And I went into public service because when I went away from my hometown and my neighborhood that was 85, 90% Mexican American, I could see the difference there at Stanford of a place that had, in the Bay Area in the early 90s, was like teeming with opportunity and this sense of being ready for the future and unlimited possibilities. And I noticed that there weren't that many people that were from the place that I was from, and not that many people overall that looked like me there in those places. And I kind of got a chip on my shoulder. I wanted to go back home and to do something about that. And I know we're going to talk about where we are today too, but I see what I'm doing today as just a different way to do that, to create that kind of opportunity for people, this time not in public service, but through the mission of the Latino Community Foundation, which is to harness the power of philanthropy to unleash the civic and economic power of Latinas and Latinos.
Thank you, Julián. And stopping on economic power for a moment is a really nice segue for you, Noramay, because I know studied engineering at MIT, and you are one of very few folks who work in the space of venture capital. And so would invite you to tell us a little bit about your life story, how you got into the work that you do today, and let us hear a little bit about your role as a governing board member of the Latino Community Foundation, but also the Latino Corporate Directors Association, which has a really compelling mission. So Noramay, please.
Thanks, Sandra. I was born in Colima, Mexico. In case any of you out there have been there, it is a small, tiny state famous for coconuts and a beautiful place. I grew up in Los Angeles. I was one of the lucky beneficiaries of the famous tap on the shoulder that we know is critical to many first-generation college graduates. Where even though I was in a math, science, technology magnet program, I didn't know what kind of career that could turn into. And I was lucky that someone from my high school had gone off to MIT and came back and spoke to students and shared his very personal life story in a way that was relatable, in a way that resonated, in a way that really inspired me, unlike anything else I'd ever experienced. And the story went a little something like, I grew up around the corner. My mom is illiterate. My dad's a janitor, and I'm studying engineering at MIT. And if I can do that, you can too. And it was the right motivation at the right time, and it really sparked my career in technology and innovation. And so I went to MIT. I studied mechanical engineering. I would eventually come back for a systems engineering degree and an MBA, but I spent 12 years in the aerospace sector, working really at the forefront of technology, bringing products to market at a large scale. And after business school and after several years of leading, profit and loss for some of these programs, I really wanted to be in a position where I got to influence what products we were building, what communities were being served, and more importantly, who was in the front seat having a chance at building their dreams. And so in 2015, I made the big pivot to venture capital first investing in deep tech, manufacturing, supply chain, aerospace, and space tech. And then over time, evolving where I invest and who I invest in, and investing with a deeper lens for impact. I've made over 75 investments over the last 9 years across industries, across stages. But I've had the chance to invest in many Latinos building out their ideas and dreams. And it is truly, there's no place else I'd rather be in terms of this intersection of innovation, equity, and impact. And so whether in the corporate sector, I'm a co-founder of an organization called Latinas in STEM. I co-founded Latinx VC, now Somos VC, and now in venture investing in food and ag. No matter where I've been, this intersection has been key and important, and a thread throughout my career.
Noramay, will you say one more word about Somos VC, because that has a direct relevance to the conversation we're trying to have this morning.
Absolutely, and I know we'll get to it, and we'll get to talk about some of the challenges, and that's certainly where the story plays in on the private side. But Somos VC is an organization that was founded by 9 or 10 venture capitalists in 2019, at a time where you could count the number of Latina partners in the US on 2 hands. The number was truly small. And our goal was to increase the ecosystem of Latino founders, but also Latino funders, really knowing that one side of the table greatly influences, the other side, who walks out with capital in their pocket on the other side. And so it's an organization that's been operating for the last 5 years at that intersection.
So let me take a moment just to offer just a few facts, because Noramay and Julián both talk about sort of what the opportunities are, how they've gotten where they've gotten. But it's worth knowing where we are with Latino representation in general. And so just a few facts that I found interesting. There's a study out of UCLA called the Latino GDP. And it really looks at the economic performance of Latinos in the United States. And based on their study, Latinos' GDP would be $3.2 trillion. $3.2 trillion, or the 5th largest in the world after India, France, and the United Kingdom. And that really just tells you what the enormous economic power of the Latino community is in the United States. There's also, and this is something that I pulled out of the Latino Corporate Directors Association's work, and they track board seats on corporate boards. Latinos represent less than 5% of Fortune 500 board seats. And similarly, 5% of Fortune 1000 board seats. And then there was a very interesting study in California looking at boardroom equity. And there it showed that in 2021, despite the fact that there are over 1 million businesses in California alone run by Latinos, and of course the population of the state's about 40% Latino, less than 4% is represented by Latinos on corporate boards. And so what those data points would suggest to me is there's enormous opportunity to expand that representation in a way that both helps those companies be successful with their consumer base, but also importantly to bring the kinds of stories that Julián and Noramay really have been describing. So with that, I'm curious, Julián, you talked about public service and the Latino Community Foundation. Noramay has a relationship. Actually, the 3 of us have a loving relationship, I think, for the Latino Community Foundation. And, for me, the real joy there has been to attract Latino leaders into that organization, to really be able to lift up the philanthropic power of Latinos within our communities. And so, Julián, I'm curious, sort of your vision going forward for the Latino Community Foundation. Should note also that if you look at philanthropic giving to Latino nonprofits, it's a abysmal 1.1%, depending on what data you look at. So a little share about your vision, Julián, for Latino Community Foundation, and how some of the folks that are on this phone might be allies to us and might think about leaning into that opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sandra. No, and as you well know, the Latino Community Foundation has such a rich history here in California. The beginnings of it were as an offshoot of the San Francisco Foundation in 1989, but really it became an independent statewide foundation in 2016, so less than 10 years ago. And with this mission of unleashing the civic and economic power of Latinas and Latinos. And so we're trying to do that in three basic ways: by investing in grassroots power building. Over the last several years, the Latino Community Foundation has invested in more than 300 Latina and Latino-led nonprofits across the state that are doing great work, from educating and mobilizing voters to organizing so that, for instance, as infrastructure dollars and other dollars come down from Washington, in small communities and big communities, neighbors can get together and advocate for those dollars to go into their neighborhoods. In fact, the organizations that LCF has funded have leveraged over $700 million of that federal funding. So it's making sure that the community is well organized. Secondly, it's by investing in economic opportunity and justice in the state. We invest in promotoras and their ability to go out and to help organize their communities, in entrepreneurship, ensuring that somebody who has a dream of starting a small business can start that small business and grow that small business. And we do that by putting dollars into organizations like the Bebop Center down in San Bernardino, or this year, for the first time, Stanford's LBAN effort that starts with businesses that have at least $1 million in revenue and want to grow them beyond that. And then the third thing is we're cultivating the largest network of Latino philanthropists in the country. We administer 17 different giving circles in the state. Many of them by geography, but also some of them by profession. For instance, there's a Latinos in Tech circle. So my vision for the organization is to harness each of those things that we're doing to go deeper in California to some of these communities, whether it's the Central Valley or the Imperial Valley, the Inland Empire, that have been less invested in. And then also to expand the Latino Community Foundation outside of California. So for the first time this year, we made investments in civic organizing outside of the state, in Arizona and Nevada, because those are two places that are tremendously important in terms of what's going to happen later in the year, in November of this year. And, you know, we're a 501c3 organization, so it's not partisan, it's not based on a candidate, it's simply based on making sure that the Latino community is well informed and exercises their right to vote and exercises the power that's commensurate with the numbers. And the way I see it, this is an imperative, not just for the benefit of Latinos, but for the nation. The last census told us that more than 25% of the children in this country are little Latinas or Latinos. That means that the destiny of the United States and the destiny of this community is intertwined completely. The only way for the country to succeed is if the Latino community succeeds, and vice versa. So, you know, we're excited about the work ahead. Certainly, you know, we may get into a little of this conversation. They're challenging times right now when we think about the push against DEI and what's in the air and the anxiety of 2024. But that only makes us more resolved to make these investments and to have the back of the Latino community.
You know, Noramay, in your story, you talked about, you know, this somebody sort of tapping you on your shoulder and being at the right place and hearing a compelling story that then allowed you to go on a path that really, quite frankly, is really quite unique. And, I remember when I was director of health being, serving for a public commission for people to be able to come and testify and give feedback in a way that would actually influence programs and priorities and strategies. And so I suspect that all of us at one point or another have been in a room where we're the only Latino sitting in the room around us. And I wonder if each of you would talk a little bit about what kind of influence you have in that room, how you think about changing and expanding the voices in that room. I know that on numerous organizations you sit in. This is not true at Latino Community Foundation, where there's an extraordinary board, and it's a Latino organization, obviously. But in terms of our audience and them thinking about how to expand voices in the boardroom, what experiences have you had that you might share with the folks that are joining us this morning about how to think about the value of that voice, that experience, and really roles that folks can play to continue to expand representation? And maybe, Noramay, I'll start with you, and then I'll come back to you, Julia.
Yeah. It's a great question, Sandra, and I think the influence actually starts, I'll talk about the private side first. That influence can really start before the investment is made, and I'll give you an example. I serve on the investment committee of the Acumen America Fund, which is a fund investing in future of work, health, and financial technology. And we were recently reviewing a possible investment opportunity, and I took a look at the memo. There are a few things that are key to me that I laser focus on. One of them is the cap table. So where does ownership for this company reside? And I noticed a really big disparity between two co-founders. An 80% disparity between equity holding. And I asked a question, right? I put my curiosity hat on and I asked a question, and I said, what's the reason behind this equity disparity? And the answer was, we're not sure. And so there was a little bit of investigating, and the answer was still, it was kind of arbitrary. And the person at the short end of that stick was a Latina. And this was, this was key and important to me. And in the end, as a condition of investment, we had a conversation with other investors, with the CEO, and, had a side letter in place that ensured there would be movement in terms of equity allocation. So that's one way in which directors and investors can really influence the very real financial outcome that can come about in the private markets. And other ways include, who else is part of the syndicate that is closing a deal. I'm part of an organization called Cap Table Coalition, which is an organization really focused on bringing Black and Brown voices to private boardrooms. And so when you're a member, you ask that every company you invest in, have a commitment to diversifying their cap table, which means in every subsequent investment round, they're going to create an allocation. They're going to be, shopping the deal around with angel groups that are made up of professional Latinos and African Americans in this space. And so those are some of the very tangible ways with economic upside that are critical, where we can really have a voice in recommending. And Natalie Molina Nino, the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Known, recently posted something on LinkedIn that really got me thinking. And I'll share it with you all as well. It was, a little bit of a reminder and, advice around how we as Latinos can really win. And so it said, when someone is looking for talent, we have the propensity to ask, what's the job description? Do you have a job description? Or if they're looking for a business development opportunity, we might ask, do you have an RFP? And her advice was, that if you value connecting people and truly creating opportunities, you don't wait for the job description and you don't wait for the RFP. You make an introduction and allow your network to step into the role and help write the job description. You help craft the RFP so that it can be molded and created to serve, the person that you believe should be in that role. And that was a very critical reminder, because I'm guilty of this too when I'm busy. It's easier to share a job description than it is to have a very open-minded, ping to someone. So these are, I think these are the tangible ways that I think we can really uplift each other pre-investment, post-investment, and in subsequent rounds. And then in terms of referring talents to different opportunities in our network.
Yeah, thank you, Noramay. Your remarks remind me the California Healthcare Foundation has an innovation fund, and we have been very conscious about trying to improve tech as a way to better serve the Latino population, particularly those in the Medi-Cal program in the state of California. And we've been in this innovation fund for, I don't know, well over a decade. And, when you turn around and look, you realize exactly what you said, which is you can find people who have great innovative ideas. The question is, are they solving to the problems that the community that you're trying to serve actually have? And when we looked at the nature of the investments we had made, they were pretty homogeneous. And so one of the ways that we began to try to unpack that was to say to ourselves, well, who's looking and how do we look? And so your comments about networks and how you tap into those networks, and Julián, your comments about these incubators and how they tap into new talent and new capabilities is just a really important takeaway, because we are, as a Latino community, increasingly developing those networks. And the questions around, is it a job description or is it an RFP, as opposed to where do you spread the word and what networks can you tap into and what doors can you actually open, seems to me to be, it sounds so simple and yet it's really quite profound. I wonder, Julián, any thoughts that you have? The Latino Community Foundation, and Noramay, I'd be curious about your views of it. But it does seem to me that there is this moment in time, both because of demographics and, as you said, the political times that we live in, Julián, where bringing Latino voices into various different rooms could not be more important. And so I'm wondering, Julián, any observations that you have really about what folks on this call this morning might be able to do in the spirit of expanding those networks. You talked about leaving California and going into other states, and taking lessons that have been learned in California really to other states as well. But also, both of you effectively are talking about raising dollars. Noramay, you're getting ready to start a new fund. And the role of LCF is to grow the philanthropic dollars in order to put money back into the Latino community and really to tap Latino philanthropists as well. And so I guess I'd ask both of you, what advice would you give to folks that are on this call, be they Latinos or allies, about really how to help the movements that you are both so very much engaged in? So Julián, maybe I'll start with you and then I'll go to you, Noramay.
Yeah, well, I mean, just at a basic level, and I have a hunch that so many of the folks on the Zoom do this, to find a way to help ensure that others are able to reach their dreams the way that you've been able to reach yours. And I know that people do that in different ways, through their volunteer work, professionally, or in their community. and through their giving, we're cultivating, I mentioned, the largest network of Latino and Latino philanthropists. So hundreds of people here in California, and now looking to expand that to Arizona and Nevada. And so there are different ways that we can do that, that you can do that. And at the Latino Community Foundation, we're interested in harnessing that ability. We're also interested in, like, where are those networks of great Latina, or those organizations that Latina and Latino leaders are in charge of, because we want to play our role in supporting them. That's what the foundation has been doing. Of course, in order to do that, we also seek support, as you mentioned, Sandra, from foundations and individual donors, and always willing to have that conversation. But I also wanted to say, Noramay's advice and her perspective is absolutely, I think, spot on. And I would say, what I see out there is that to the extent that a company cares about the bottom line, that so many different consumer markets are increasingly dominated by Latinos and Latinas who are purchasing, whether you're talking about entertainment or the home building industry or consumer goods of every stripe. And so there's a tremendous data argument to be made when you're sitting on that board, or you're arguing to a board about the importance of having more Latino and Latino people in the C-suite, certainly on the board. Same thing goes with the organizations that we support, nonprofits. You look at communities all across the country, not just in these usual suspect states like California or my home state of Texas or New York or Florida, but all across the country, and the community is growing in places that you would never think. I've had good Mexican food in Wyoming and in Iowa too, believe it or not. And so as a consumer base, and also a base of talent and leadership, the community is only getting stronger and stronger. And so my hope is that folks will use their lived experience, that they'll be then full there. When you're sitting in that board seat, you'll be your full self, and also go the extra mile to try and bring other folks into the professional circle and social circles that often lead to opportunities for them. And in a constructive, smart way, using the data, point out where you think there ought to be improvement in the company. And I think that if each of us plays that role individually, and then finds others as well that are willing to do that, and those others, sometimes they're Latino and Latina, a lot of times they're not. Some of the biggest allies, are folks who are not Latino or Latina. You find people who are like-minded and willing to be, helpful when it comes to representation all over the place. And so, fundamentally being rooted in community and creating opportunity for others. That's what this organization is about. And I think that at the individual level, that's what I hope that each and every person will be about.
Julián, your comment about bringing your full self to these board seats. I serve on the board of 23andMe. This is I'm a primary care trained physician, and so when you go in that room, you're talking about how to use genetic material, what kind of therapeutics, and really, trying to center yourself around what unique value add do I bring to this room is such an important part of governance. I have the opportunity to serve as a Newsom appointee on a public service board, the Office of Healthcare Affordability in California. It's a very small board because it can't have conflicts, et cetera. And I'm struck that people come and testify to the board to talk about affordability issues all across the state. And there was a very large contingent of workers from Monterey who came to the board really to talk about the very unique monopolistic challenges that exist in affordability in Monterey. And all of them came with interpreters because they did not speak English. during the break, I had the opportunity to talk to folks who, of course, have 2 minutes at the mic to tell their really compelling stories. And folks came up to me and were so proud to be able to testify publicly and have a Latina on the board who really understands sort of these life circumstances that they're talking about, and really who have the influence to really make important decisions. So in a couple of months, we're going to go to Monterey and go there and actually hear about what the circumstances are there for the hotel workers and the service workers and unionized folks who really are losing wages because they're paying so much for healthcare. And it's just a very important lesson, Julián, that you made me think about, bringing your whole self, but also recognizing that people then see you, in particular if you're in these public settings, as someone who can understand their background and their lived experience, and really makes it a much more personable and compelling, both as a board member, but also for folks who are really trying to create change in our community. So thank you for naming that. Noramay, I'm curious, you serve on a lot of boards, you're working in this space quite a bit. What advice do you have for allies who are really looking to expand the diversity of their boards, and or really the reach of boards into more diverse communities in general? Any advice that you would offer for folks who are joining us this morning?
Yeah, I wanted to, I'll get to that. So that I wanted to just share a little bit more about LCF and
Please.
The innovation role. If any of you on the line know Jacqueline, you know that she doesn't take no for an answer. And so when she reached out to me,
A force of nature.
Force of nature. When she reached out to me, I thought, gosh, I don't know that I have capacity for another nonprofit board. And she would give me time to stew on it or noodle on it, and then call me again and say, what are you thinking about now? How about now? And ultimately, what was really compelling to me was the vision around the endowment and the future role that LCF could play, beyond the philanthropic sector, or even through the philanthropic sector. And what we're seeing now is this, convergence of players around innovation, where endowments like CalPERS are dedicating capital to the innovation economy, where organizations like the California Endowment have said we're turning 100% of our dollars toward impact. The California Wellness Foundation is making direct investments in innovation as well as fund investments. And so that space was really interesting, and we've made great strides in growing the endowment, updating our investment policy statement, and there's certainly a future in which LCF will also be playing a role in who gets to build and what kind of solutions are coming to the market. So that's really exciting, and that's where we converge on many of these goals. In our own supply chain portfolio, 39% of the CEOs we've invested in are Latino. Over half are women. And there's some really interesting innovations here in California that I think the audience might resonate with. And I'd love to give some examples if that's okay. And then we can step back and talk about, why this is important for Latinos as a whole. One of those companies is based in the Bay Area. It's called Microma, and they are developing natural ingredients from fungi, beginning with colorants. So when we think about the colorants in our food that are synthetic, that are chemical based, that are derived from I'm losing the words. They are harmful to health. They're harmful to the environment. And this company is really trying to bring to market products that are healthier, that serve the same colorant purpose, because our use of colorants in the food ecosystem has grown 5x since the 1950s. So we like our colorful food. And then California is at the forefront of this policy tailwind, specifically, right? In late 2023, California banned 4 food additives, including one red 3. And so this is a common additive in things like candy and food products. It was already banned in cosmetics, but not banned in food. And so this is one example when we think about the health wellness link and how it affects communities of color, particularly Latinos. This is one company that is certainly exciting to me. And I'll share just one other, which is also a San Francisco-based company called Compound, founded by a Latina with lots of experience across the coffee industry. And what she is building is a company that produces beanless coffee. It uses byproducts from the coffee industry to recreate the taste of coffee without the beans. So in essence, you can have a cup of coffee that was produced using 95% less water and without the detrimental financial impact to coffee farmers. And she's, especially working with smallholder coffee farmers who are women across Latin America. So we think about women as the backbone of the food and ag economy, but we also think about the minority coming in 2050 and how those purchasing decisions that you've both talked about now will impact food and the decisions we make around shopping. And so when we go out and attract investment dollars for the work that we do, just like Julián said, we very much center on this data. Who is making purchasing decisions? What kinds of products do we want to see on shelf? And what are the technologies and services that will bring those to bear? And so back to the advice on allyship and what is critical. I think what is critical is centering on the data, leveraging networks like NACD, LCDA, and even innovation networks like Cap Table Coalition, Angeles Investors out of Chicago, which is a network of professional Latinos also investing in early stage companies and bringing their expertise to bear. Those are the networks where, I would go to seek particular industry expertise with a lens for, additional insights that could benefit some of these companies.
Your comment, Noramay, really, the word that comes to mind is just sort of how do we think about sustainability as the Latino population continues to grow? And your examples are from food. And I know California Healthcare Foundation invested quite a bit into the Latino Community Foundation around disaster resilience, really looking at climate and some of the challenges, the unique challenges that climate has on so many populations, but in particular, farm workers and people who work in ag. And I don't know, Julián, if you want to talk a little bit about the work that LCF has done to build that capability and that muscle, and really the work that it's done to reach into Latino communities to begin to think about resilience and sustainability. Noramay's comments about food really triggered that for me. And so maybe a couple words about that, Julián. And I will tell the audience, we're going to open this up to questions in a few minutes. So get ready to put any questions you have for Julián or Noramay into the chat, and we'll come to that in a few minutes. But Julián, anything you come to mind on that point?
Yeah, at LCF, we have both the honor and the privilege of working for some of the most vulnerable communities in California, most especially our farm worker communities. And in places like the Half Moon Bay area, the Central Valley, the Inland Empire, and some of that has centered on sustainability and resilience, and particularly investing in the organizing work that it takes so that groups there can advocate for better investments in housing opportunity, for resources from the local, state, and federal governments to ensure better quality of life, whether it's on health or economic opportunity, because these are communities that when natural disasters hit, as we've seen over the years, or also sometimes when man-made disasters hit, like the shooting that happened in the Half Moon Bay area in early 2023, those vulnerable communities are hit the hardest. And we've seen some really great progress in some of these communities. I'll give you just a quick example of that. We sent over a letter. Governor Newsom sent one also, and some other leaders just recently, because the city of Half Moon Bay is considering moving forward with a housing development for retired farm workers. A lot of farm workers, while they're working, they live in farm worker housing. This housing is often ramshackle. You can imagine these are not great units. But then what happens after they can no longer work in the fields? These are some of the most vulnerable, some of the lowest income folks. These are in my old neck of the woods of housing, what you would consider extremely low income, less than 30% of the area median income residents. Well, this project really is a unique project, and it's supported by a couple of the groups that we're supporting through LCF, including a group called ALAS that's located there in the Half Moon Bay area. So that's what we do. We support leadership in organizations that are advocating fiercely to provide opportunity, in this case, housing opportunity for farm workers and for other vulnerable residents of the state. And I think it's very true, and I saw this when I was in the public sector, that progress never comes as quickly as you would like. Never comes as quickly as you would like. But that's why there's such an imperative to keep at it, and to be dogged and relentless, and to find others through allyship to help contribute to the forward progress, and to get stronger in that way. And that's what we're trying to do at the Latino Community Foundation on behalf of farm worker communities.
You know, as we think about the flow of capital into the Latino community, and Noramay gave many good examples, Julián, you know, this large influx of infrastructure dollars that was passed by the federal government is, you know, it takes time for those dollars to flow through all the pipes and channels to get actually into communities. And I noticed, as you know, reviewing all the data, that Latinos also have real issues getting access to those dollars as well, infrastructure dollars and capital that flows through the public sector. And you know, you were Secretary of HUD, and so I know you have familiarity with that. And I wonder if you have any observations about that particular opportunity as it relates to capital flow into communities, and the ability for folks to be ready to apply for those dollars as they actually reach communities. And you know, you were talking about housing in Half Moon Bay, and you were Secretary of HUD, and so maybe one or two observations there, or stories there, and then I will turn to. I know a number of people want to have questions, so we'll turn it over to our audience in a moment. So, Julián, anything on that point?
Yeah, you know, it takes capacity to be able to compete and to draw down those dollars. And oftentimes these communities that we're talking about, and the smaller they are, whether they're Latino or non-Latino, you know, whoever the smaller they are, oftentimes the more difficult it is to compete for those dollars. So, you know, we're taking the initiative on this. For instance, 2.5 weeks ago now, at the Governor's Philanthropy Summit, we agreed at LCF to take the lead on building up the capacity of nonprofits in the Imperial Valley to draw down federal funds, state funding, and also to advocate for local policies that are going to create greater economic opportunity, as we have that lithium mining play that's going to unfold in full in the years to come.
2 minutes more about that, Julián, because most people probably don't know about that. Just add 2 sentences more on that opportunity.
Sure. Yeah, well, folks probably know, of course, the Imperial Valley is an area of about 7 cities, mostly in Imperial County. This area, Imperial County, is 86% Latino. And this area in California, along with an area in Nevada, and then one more area, I think in Pennsylvania, I could be wrong about that, but are going to be the primary centers where lithium mining takes place. There's lithium in the geothermal brine of the area in Imperial Valley. There are about 3 major companies that are doing that mining, and that's going to create tremendous wealth for those companies. And we want to make sure that it's not just an extractive economy, but it also creates greater wealth, greater opportunity, greater quality of life for the people who actually live there. There are 7 cities in that region. None of these cities is bigger than about 40,000 people. So these are small towns, and the small towns, the city level, that county level, and the nonprofits don't really have the capacity right now to compete for significant federal or state funding, and also to organize to help ensure that not only the companies benefit, but also that the people benefit. And that's where LCF comes in. We're going to take the leading role in building up the capacity of nonprofits to be able to write those grants, to be able to organize their communities, to be able to help hold folks accountable, to make investments in housing, in transit, in public health, in every way, so that the people who are actually living there are the beneficiaries of the activity that happens there, that's going to create so much wealth, and also, you know, make sure that people have the battery that they need for their cell phone and everything else that depends on lithium these days.
Great. So maybe what I'll do now is open it up to anybody who's on the call that have any questions for Julián or Noramay.
There's one that might be good for Julián. You mentioned only 1.1% of philanthropic donations go to Latino nonprofits. What are some ideas to increase donations?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, we see our role at Latino Community Foundation as central to that. We get a lot of our funding from foundations, and we invest those dollars into Latino and Latina-led nonprofits. I mentioned over 300 of them over the last several years in California. And so, you know, we go out there and we identify a lot of these organizations that are doing fantastic work, but oftentimes don't have the connection to larger foundations. They're not even on their radar screen yet. And we see ourselves as a bridge between the two, in supporting their growth, in helping to cultivate capacity there, strengthening their organizing. And what we've seen in the case of a lot of them is that they actually are able to succeed in getting on the radar screen of the bigger foundations, and then get foundation funding. So I think that, you know, we're doing our role, and certainly the foundations that support us and the individuals that support us feel very confident that it's helping to lift up that number from 1.1% to hopefully higher in the state of California. I also just think that people here probably on this Zoom, y'all are probably on, and I know, on foundation boards across the state and in other parts of the country. This is something that there has to be an intentionality here of it's unacceptable that only just over 1% of those philanthropic dollars goes to Latina and Latino-led nonprofits, when it's such a big community, almost a fifth of the nation now. And when you look at different vulnerabilities in housing, in public health, in education, and so forth, that's an even greater percent. So there is a real urgency here.
Noramay, are you looking at chat?
I am.
Is there another question there? Because I can't see it.
No, I don't see another question.
Great. Well, I want to remind folks that are on the call, if they take a minute to fill out their survey today as well, because I know that we'd like to be able to give feedback. The question, Julián, I see, which I'm sure you'll want to answer, is: do you expect the Latino Community Foundation to reach into that big state in the South that you come from?
Yeah, you know, people have asked that about Texas. Of course, eventually we do. I mean, Texas is the other big state that's about 40% Latino and Latina, and has tremendous, I think, needs and also potential. We're starting with Arizona and Nevada, our neighboring states that also have huge Latino populations and a lot of need, and we're looking to grow. I hope that folks will go to our website, latinocf.org, but eventually, in my vision of things, within the next 3 years, that we're going to get into Texas as well. And yeah, I wish that that Texas had politics that reflected a little bit more of the perspective that we see here. And I think that's happening. But either way, the work that needs to be done for the Latino community is very intense there as well. And I look forward to it because LCF has such a great track record of producing results here in California that I'm confident we can do that in the Southwest. And then eventually, my vision is that it become one of the premier national Latino organizations in the next decade. So we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Well, let me just put a plug in for the Southwest. My grandparents, my grandfather worked in the railroad in Nuevo Mexico, and I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm just delighted, absolutely delighted to see the Latino Community Foundation moving into Arizona. And I know you're doing some work in Nevada, and I hope soon in Nuevo Mexico. And then Texas is there, we know, and maybe we can start to influence it to be as enlightened really as the state of California has been. If you look at our legislature, you look at our philanthropic sector, you look at our really just the innovation coming out of the Latino community. It's true in California, but it's true in many other states as well, Julián. And so we're delighted to have you. I know Noramay is on the board at LCF, but really delighted to have you in this role at the Latino Community Foundation. And I certainly look forward to meeting with you. And thank everybody for being with us this morning. I want to thank NACD, again, Tarateas for sponsoring this event today, for all of you joining us today. And really the big takeaway message here is really networks and relationships, and really how do we continue to expand them and reach out and really not let the ways in which things have stayed so insular to really begin to break through that and let all the innovations that are happening in the Latino community, the resilience of the Latino community, and really how important that is to the economy of the United States, the economy of the states in which we live. So let me thank you, Julián. Thank you, Noramay, both of you for being with us today, but more importantly, for the work that you do. Noramay, I'm delighted that you had the bandwidth to add to LCF to your list of efforts. And Julián, I know all of us look forward to working with you in your new capacity. Thank you again for all of you for joining us this morning. I hope it was a helpful conversation. And again, thank you to our sponsors today.